Let's install Xdebug. So let's head to our Docker file responsible for building a PHP image. So we need to do a few things. We need to install some additional packages. We need to install Xdebug extension, and finally we need to configure it. On the very end, we're gonna configure our PHP storm to play nicely with Xdebug. Okay, so as a first package we need build base. This will allow us to compile our Xdebug extension. We also need autoconf. We need to install Xdebug extension, and we're gonna do that with peckle. So we're gonna do peckle install Xdebug, and we need to specify the version. You have to remember that the version of Xdebug need to be compatible with your version of PHP. So in our case, this is compatible version we're gonna use. And on the very end, we need to also enable this extension. So what we can do, we can say docker PHP extension enable, and the name of the extension, which is Xdebug. Okay, great. So after rerunning this, we're gonna have Xdebug installed. So now let's quickly jump into terminal and try to recreate this image with docker compose app-d build force recreate. Let's just wait a few seconds. And looks like everything just went fine. Let's quickly just confirm with docker ps and see if our PHP container is running, and looks like it's running. So now we can go to the browser and we will hit our php.info. Let's just refresh, and we're gonna look for Xdebug extension, and as you can see, it's installed. So this is all good. Now we are interested in a configuration file for our Xdebug extension, which is located here. So let's just copy that and let's go back to our editor. So now what we need to do, we need to configure our extension, and we're gonna do that with running some commands. So we're gonna run, and we're gonna append some variables, some configuration variables to the end of this file, and we can do that with echo. We're gonna have some output here, and we're gonna append this to the end of this file. And let me just grab this. So this will be appended to the end of this file, and let me just grab and copy and paste the rest of the configuration. Okay, so those are all the configuration variables we need in order to have our Xdebug configured properly. Now you can see here I've got 3 dots. I want to have control over these variables, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna specify them in my .env. So let me just grab those just for reference. I'm gonna go to my .env, and on the very end I'm gonna specify these variables, and we're gonna start with Xdebug remote port. Next is Xdebug IDE key, which is gonna be PHP Storm, and finally we need Xdebug remote host. And for our remote port, we run our PHP already on port 9000, so we're gonna use something else like 7765. Now for our remote host, we need to use internal IP of our machine. So what we can do, there are different ways on different operating systems how you can get your internal IP, but on Mac you can run ipconfig get if addr, and if you are on wireless you can do en1. This won't work for me because I am on a cable on the internet, so I'm gonna do en0, and that will give me my IP address, which I need to copy and paste into my .env as a remote host. So after that we are done here. Now the problem is we can't use these variables in our Docker file because variables from .env are not available during the build. So we're gonna do something else instead. We're gonna grab these variables and we're gonna go back to our Docker Compose. What we can do in our Docker Compose, we can specify some arguments. So we're gonna do args, and we're gonna specify arguments. So we're gonna do this, and we can pass the value with these arguments. And what we can do, we can assign the value from .env because we've got access to the .env in our Docker Compose. So we can assign the values from .env to these arguments by doing this. So let's quickly do that. And again, for IDE key. So again, what I'm doing here, I'm making sure that all configuration is in my .env. So next time I'm gonna start a new project with this environment, I can just simply configure it in my .env and I'm ready to go. Okay, so with this out of the way, we're gonna save that and we can go back to our Docker file. So this is passed into our Docker file as an argument. So in here we can grab these arguments. So let me just do that. Let me just delete all of this and all of this and all of this. So we can grab the arguments by saying arg, and we're gonna do it for every single one. And now we can assign argument to a variable with the command env. Then we need the name of the argument and the name of the variable, and we're gonna have exactly the same name of the variable. So we're gonna do exactly the same for this one. So it's gonna be env, name of the argument, name of the variable, and exactly the same for the last one. So we're gonna do env. Great. So now we've got our variables passed. So what we can do, we can now reference them in here. So what we're gonna do for our remote port, we can just pass the variable for our Xdebug key. We're gonna do exactly the same, and the same for our remote host. So with this configuration out of the way, let's quickly jump into terminal and try to recreate our container. So I'm gonna do docker compose app-d build force recreate. That will recreate the containers. Let's have a look. php docker ps. Looks like PHP is running. So just to confirm that the configuration was saved, let's go to docker. Let's do docker exec. Let's ssh into container -it, name of our container, which is my project -php sh, and let's inspect the configuration file. So what we can do, we can copy this and we can just say cut, and let's see, and as you can see, configuration was saved successfully. So now we should be able to use our Xdebug. So let's quickly jump into our PHP Storm and configure our PHP Storm and start our first debugging session. So let's just head to PHP Storm preferences. So let's do that, and let's just search for PHP, and it should be the one in languages and frameworks. So within here we need to specify the version of PHP we are using, which is 7.2. We also need to specify CLI interpreter, so we're gonna choose that, and we're gonna click the plus icon, and here we've got option to choose that we want to use Docker. You can do new and specify a configuration. I'm on Docker for Mac, so obviously I've got this already configured. And here interesting thing is that you can actually specify the container, and here is the executable. So let's just click OK. That will take just a minute or a few seconds, and now we are done. You can see we've got our PHP version, we've got our configuration file for our Xdebug extension. No, this is actually GD. Well, I think that's fine. We've got our debugger Xdebug, and okay, I think we are done in here. So do we care about path mappings? I think we do. So we're gonna add some new, and we're gonna do local path. That's gonna be users, my name, and course docker, and this is going to be code, and remote path is going to be code. So let's just save that. Okay, so those are our mappings. Docker container, what's that all about? That's okay. Runtime analysis, okay, that looks all good. So now let's quickly configure our debugger. As you remember, we've got different ports, so we need to change that, 7765, and let's just click apply and OK. So I think we should be okay now. So let's quickly go to our code base, and maybe in our DB let's just set up a breakpoint, and let's start debugging session. Let's go to our browser and try to hit db.debugging. PHP. Let's click enter, and we've got a pop-up here. This is incoming connection from Xdebug, and looks like it's working, so I'm just gonna accept it. And as you can see, looks like everything is working. We've got our variables, and we successfully made connection to our Xdebugger.